A Textbook of Theosophy by Charles Webster Leadbeater. Chapter 1. What Theosophy is. There remains an extant school of philosophy of which contemporary culture has largely lost sight. With these words, Mr. Alfred Percy Sinnett commenced his volume, The Occult World, the inaugural popular exposition of Theosophy, published 3 decades ago. In the intervening years, myriad individuals have gleaned wisdom from that school, yet to the majority its doctrines remain obscure, and they can provide only the most nebulous of responses to the inquiry. What is Theosophy? 2 volumes currently exist which address that question. Mr. Sinnett's Esoteric Buddhism and Dr. Besant's The Ancient Wisdom. I entertain no thought of entering into competition with those standard works, as my sole desire is to present a statement, as lucid and straightforward as I can render it, which may be regarded as introductory to them. We frequently characterize Theosophy not as a religion per se, but rather as the foundational truth underlying all faiths alike. This is indeed accurate, yet, from an alternative perspective, we may certainly affirm that it is simultaneously a philosophy, a religion, and a science. It serves as a philosophy, inasmuch as it clearly delineates an explanation for the evolutionary scheme of both the souls and the physical forms encompassed within our solar system. It functions as a religion insofar as, having elucidated the trajectory of conventional evolution, it furthermore presents and advocates a methodology for expediting that progression, so that by conscious exertion we may advance more directly toward our ultimate objective. It qualifies as a science, given that it addresses both of these subjects not as matters of mere theological dogma, but as verifiable knowledge attainable through rigorous study and empirical investigation. It posits that humanity need not rely upon blind faith, for man possesses latent faculties within which, once awakened, empower him to perceive and investigate reality for himself, and it substantiates this claim by demonstrating precisely how such powers may be aroused. It represents inherently the culmination of the awakening of these very faculties by mankind, as the doctrines it presents are predicated upon direct observations made in antiquity, and rendered feasible exclusively by means of such spiritual development. As a philosophy, it elucidates that the solar system is a meticulously ordered mechanism, representing the manifestation of a sublime life, of which mankind constitutes merely a fractional component. Nevertheless, it addresses that specific component which most immediately concerns us, and treats it exhaustively under 3 primary categories, namely present, past, and future. It addresses the present by delineating the true nature of humanity, as perceived through the deployment of developed faculties. It is customary to speak of man as possessing a soul. Theosophy, relying upon the outcomes of direct investigation, upends that assertion and declares that man is a soul and possesses a body, indeed possessing several bodies, which serve as his vehicles and instruments across various realms of existence. These spheres are not segregated in space, as they are simultaneously present with us, here and now, and capable of being examined, functioning as the structural divisions of the material aspect of nature, which represent different degrees of density in the aggregation of matter, as will presently be elucidated in rigorous detail. Humanity maintains an existence within several of these planes, but is typically conscious only of the lowest stratum, although occasionally in dreams and trances he is afforded fleeting glimpses of the others. That which is termed death is merely the laying aside of the vehicle tethered to this lowest realm, but the soul or true man residing in a higher sphere is no more altered or impacted by this transition than the physical man is changed or affected upon discarding his overcoat. All of this remains a matter, not of idle speculation, but of empirical observation and rigorous experiment. Theosophy imparts a wealth of knowledge concerning the archaic history of mankind, regarding how in the grand sweep of evolution he has arrived at his present state. This likewise is a matter of direct observation, owing to the existence of an indelible record chronicling all that has transpired, a veritable memory of nature, by the examination of which the epochs of primordial evolution may be summoned to pass before the investigator's vision as vividly as if they were unfolding at this very instant. By analyzing the past in this manner, we discern that humanity is of divine origin and possesses a profoundly extended evolutionary heritage behind him, encompassing a dual evolution, that of the inner life or soul, and that of the external corporeal form. We ascertain, furthermore, that the duration of man's existence as a soul is of what appears to our limited perception, an immense span, and that what we are customarily habituated to designating as his life is in truth only a single day within his authentic existence. He has already traversed numerous such days, and has a multitude of them still stretching before him, and if we endeavor to comprehend his genuine existence and its ultimate purpose, we must evaluate it in relation not merely to this singular day of it, which commences with birth and terminates with death, but equally in the context of the days that have preceded it and those that remain yet to dawn. Regarding those eras that are yet to unfold, there is likewise much to be articulated. And upon this subject, furthermore, a substantial repository of definitive information is readily accessible. Such intelligence is attainable primarily from enlightened individuals who have already progressed considerably further along the evolutionary path than we ourselves, and possess consequently direct experience thereof, and secondarily from logical inferences deduced from the manifest trajectory of the steps we observe to have been previously undertaken. The objective of this particular cycle is perceptible, though still far above us, but it would appear that, even once that zenith has been attained, an absolute infinity of progress still awaits anyone who is prepared to undertake the endeavor. Among the most remarkable advantages of Theosophy is the fact that the illumination it bestows upon us immediately resolves a multitude of our dilemmas, eradicates numerous intellectual obstacles, rationally accounts for the ostensible injustices of terrestrial existence, and invariably brings profound order out of seeming chaos. Consequently, while certain facets of its doctrine are predicated upon the observation of forces whose direct operations lie somewhat beyond the cognitive purview of the conventional man of the world, should this individual consent to accept it provisionally as a hypothesis, he will very promptly recognize its undeniable veracity, because it, and it alone, provides a coherent and perfectly rational explication for the profound drama of life unfolding before his eyes. The existence of perfected men, alongside the profound possibility of forging a connection with them and receiving their instruction, stand prominent among the magnificent new verities that Theosophy introduces to the Western world. Yet another of these revelations is the stupendous reality that the world is by no means drifting blindly toward anarchy, but rather that its advancement is meticulously guided by a perfectly organized hierarchy, ensuring that ultimate failure even for the most infinitesimal of its constituent units is of all impossibilities the most impossible. A mere glimpse into the operations of that august hierarchy inevitably engenders a profound aspiration to cooperate with it, to serve beneath its aegis, in however humble a capacity, and sometime in the far distant future to prove worthy of joining the outermost fringes of its exalted ranks. This consideration brings us to that specific dimension of Theosophy which we have previously designated as religious. Individuals who come to know and intimately understand these profound truths grow dissatisfied with the languid eons of ordinary evolution, as they yearn to render themselves more immediately useful, and consequently they demand and successfully obtain knowledge regarding the shorter but steeper path. There exists no conceivable possibility of evading the requisite magnitude of labor that must be accomplished. The endeavor is analogous to bearing a burden up a mountain, since whether one conveys it directly up a precipitous trail or more gradually by a route of gentle incline, precisely the equivalent measure of exertion must inevitably be expended. Therefore, to accomplish this identical labor within a diminutive fraction of the customary time necessitates deeply determined effort. It can certainly be achieved, however, for it has indeed been accomplished in the past, and those who have successfully undertaken this arduous task uniformly agree that the ultimate reward far surpasses the inherent tribulations. The innate limitations of the various vehicles are thereby gradually transcended, and the liberated individual emerges as an intelligent co-worker within the magnificent design orchestrating the evolution of all sentient beings. In its capacity as a religion, furthermore, Theosophy imparts to its adherents a disciplined rule of life, predicated not upon alleged divine injunctions delivered during some remote epoch of antiquity, but rather upon unadorned common sense as clearly indicated by empirically observed facts. The disposition of the theosophical student toward the precepts it prescribes resembles far more closely the pragmatic attitude we adopt regarding hygienic regulations than it does blind obedience to orthodox religious commandments. We may state, should we so desire, that a given phenomenon is in accordance with the divine will, for this divine will finds expression in what we recognize as the laws of nature. Because that will wisely ordains all things, to transgress its laws serves to disturb the harmonious operation of the grand design, to impede for a moment that specific fragment or minute fraction of evolution, and consequently to bring discomfort upon ourselves and others. It is for this reason that the wise individual avoids violating them, rather than to escape the imagined wrath of some offended deity. Yet if from a certain perspective we might conceptualize Theosophy as a religion, we must observe two profound distinctions between it and what is conventionally termed religion in the West. First, it neither demands belief from its adherents, nor does it even speak of belief in the sense in which that term is customarily employed. The student of occult science either knows a matter definitively or suspends his judgment regarding it, as there is no place within his paradigm for blind faith. Naturally, novices in this discipline cannot yet ascertain these truths for themselves. Thus they are asked to review the results of the various observations and to treat them as probable hypotheses, provisionally to accept and act upon them, until such time as they can empirically verify them for themselves. Secondly, Theosophy never endeavors to convert any individual from whatever faith he already holds. On the contrary, it elucidates his religion for him and enables him to perceive within it deeper meanings than he had ever previously recognized. It teaches him to comprehend and practice it more profoundly than before, and in numerous instances it restores to him, upon a higher and more intellectual echelon, the faith in it that he had previously all but lost. Theosophy possesses aspects of a science as well, being in absolute truth a science of life, a science of the soul. It applies to all phenomena the scientific method of frequently repeated, painstaking observation, and subsequently tabulates the results and draws deductions from them. In this manner it has investigated the various planes of nature, alongside the conditions of human consciousness during life and after what is commonly designated as death. It cannot be reiterated too frequently that its assertions regarding all these matters are not vague conjectures or tenets of faith, but are instead founded upon direct and consistently repeated observations of actual occurrences. Its investigators have also engaged to a certain extent with subjects more traditionally aligned with ordinary science, as may be observed by those who consult the work on occult chemistry. Thus we observe that Theosophy synthesizes within itself several characteristics of philosophy, religion, and science. What, one might ask, is its gospel for this weary world? What are the principal tenets that emerge from its investigations? What are the profound facts it seeks to lay before humanity? They have been adeptly summarized under three primary headings. There exist three truths that are absolute, and which cannot be lost, yet may remain silent for lack of articulation. The soul of man is immortal, and its future is the future of an entity whose growth and splendor possess no limit. The principle that confers life dwells within us and without us, is undying and eternally beneficent, is neither heard nor seen nor smelt, but is perceived by the individual who earnestly desires such perception. Each individual is his own absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the architect of his life, his reward, his punishment. These truths, which are as monumental as life itself, are as accessible as the simplest human mind. Expressed concisely, and in the vernacular of the common man, this signifies that God is beneficent, that humanity is immortal, and that as we sow so must we reap. There exists a definitive scheme of existence, operating under intelligent direction and functioning by immutable laws. Humanity holds its designated place within this grand design and is living subject to these laws. If he comprehends them and cooperates with them, he will advance rapidly and achieve happiness, while if he does not understand them, if, wittingly or unwittingly, he transgresses against them, he will impede his progress and remain miserable. These are not mere theories, but proven facts. Let him who doubts read further, and he shall see. Chapter 2. From the Absolute to Man. Regarding the Absolute, the Infinite, the All-Embracing, we can at our current stage of development know nothing, except that it exists, for we can articulate nothing that is not a limitation, and therefore inherently inaccurate. Within it reside innumerable universes, and within each universe countless solar systems. Each solar system represents the expression of a mighty being, whom we designate as the Logos, the Word of God, the solar deity. He is to this system all that humanity signifies by the term God. He permeates it entirely, there being nothing within it that is not He, for it is His manifestation in such matter as we are capable of perceiving. Yet He exists above and beyond it, living a stupendous existence of His own among His peers, as is articulated in an Eastern scripture. Having permeated this entire universe with a single fragment of myself I remain. Of that elevated existence of His we can comprehend nothing. However, of the fragment of His life that energizes His system we may discern something within the lower levels of its manifestation. We may not behold Him directly, but we may witness His power at work. No individual possessing clairvoyance can remain atheistic, as the evidence is simply too overwhelming. Out of His own essence He has called this mighty system into being. We who reside within it are evolving fragments of His life, sparks of His divine fire, for from Him we all have emanated, and unto Him we shall all return. Many have inquired why He has undertaken this, why He has emanated from Himself this entire system, and why He has sent us forth to face the tempestuous storms of life. We cannot know the answer, nor is the inquiry a practical one, so suffice it that we are here, and that we must exert our utmost effort. Yet numerous philosophers have speculated upon this matter and various propositions have been advanced. The most profoundly beautiful explanation of which I am aware is that of a Gnostic philosopher. God is love, but love itself cannot attain perfection unless there exist those upon whom it may be lavished and by whom it may be returned. Therefore he projected his essence into matter, and he deliberately constrained his glory, in order that through this natural and gradual process of evolution we might come into existence, and we in turn according to his will are to develop until we attain even his own level, whereupon the very love of God itself will become yet more perfect, because it will then be lavished upon those, his own children, who will fully comprehend and return it, and thus his grand design will be realized and his will be done. At what stupendous elevation his consciousness abides we know not, nor can we comprehend its true nature as it manifests itself in that realm. Yet when he descends into such conditions as remain within our reach, his manifestation is invariably threefold, and thus all religions have conceptualized him as a trinity. Three, yet fundamentally one, three persons, for person signifies a mask, yet one singular God, revealing himself through those three aspects. Three to our perception, gazing upon them from below, because their respective functions are different, yet one to him, because he knows them to be merely facets of his own being. All three of these aspects are intimately involved in the evolution of the solar system, just as all three are concurrently engaged in the evolution of humanity. This evolution constitutes his will, while the method of its execution forms his plan. Next, beneath this solar deity, yet also in some profoundly mysterious manner forming a part of him, emerge his seven ministers, sometimes referred to as the planetary spirits. Employing an analogy drawn from the physiology of our own physical form, their relationship to him resembles that of the ganglia or the nerve centers to the brain. All evolutionary progress that emanates from him is channeled through one or another of them. Beneath them in sequence arise vast hosts or orders of spiritual entities, whom we designate as angels or devas. We do not yet fully comprehend all the functions they fulfill across the disparate realms of this wondrous scheme, but we observe some among them to be intimately connected with the construction of the system and the unfolding of life therein. Here within our world there resides a great official who represents the solar deity and exercises absolute control over all the evolutionary processes that take place upon this planet. We may conceive of him as the sovereign king of this world, beneath whom serve ministers entrusted with various departments. One such department governs the evolution of humanity's diverse races. Thus, for each principal race, there exists a head who establishes it, distinguishes it from all others, and oversees its progression. Another department is dedicated to religion and education. It is from this domain that history's greatest teachers have emerged, and from which all religions have been promulgated. The eminent official presiding over this department either descends himself or dispatches one of his disciples to establish a new religion whenever he determines such a need arises. Consequently, all religions, upon their initial introduction to the world, have articulated a definitive statement of the truth, a truth that, in its fundamental essence, has remained eternally consistent. Its presentations have varied to accommodate the distinctions among the races to whom it was offered. The prevailing conditions of civilization and the evolutionary stages attained by disparate races have necessitated the dissemination of this singular truth in diverse forms. Yet, the inner truth remains invariably the same, as does the source from which it emanates, even if its external manifestations appear disparate or seemingly contradictory. It is therefore futile for humanity to debate the superiority of one teacher or doctrine over another. The teacher is unequivocally an emissary of the great brotherhood of adepts, and in all essential aspects, particularly its ethical and moral principles, the teaching has remained immutable. There exists in the world a foundational body of truth underlying all these religions, representing the facts of nature to the extent they are currently comprehensible to humanity. In the secular world, oblivious to this underlying unity, individuals perpetually dispute whether a deity exists, whether the human soul survives death, whether definitive spiritual progress is attainable, and what mankind's true relationship to the universe entails. Such inquiries invariably occupy the human mind the moment intelligence awakens. They are not unanswerable, as is frequently presumed. Rather, the answers remain accessible to anyone willing to exert the requisite effort to uncover them. The truth is attainable, and the prerequisites for its realization can be fulfilled by anyone resolute enough to strive for it. In the nascent stages of humanity's development, the illustrious officials of the hierarchy were provided from external sources, specifically from more highly evolved realms of the system. However, once individuals could be cultivated to the requisite degree of power and wisdom, these offices were assumed by humanity itself. To qualify for such a venerated position, an individual must elevate himself to an extraordinary echelon, becoming what is termed an adept. Such a being possesses goodness, power, and wisdom so profound that he transcends the rest of humanity, having already reached the pinnacle of ordinary human evolution and accomplished precisely what the divine plan delineated for him during this epoch or dispensation. Nevertheless, his evolutionary journey continues far beyond that plateau, advancing ultimately toward divinity. A considerable number of individuals have ascended to the level of adept, not merely from a single nation, but from across all the leading nations of the world. These are rare souls who, armed with indomitable courage, have breached the fortresses of nature, apprehended her most profound secrets, and thereby genuinely earned the title of adepts. Within their ranks exist numerous degrees and varied avenues of endeavor. Yet, a contingent always maintains contact with our sphere as members of this hierarchy, bearing the responsibility of administering the affairs of our world and guiding the spiritual evolution of humanity. This august assembly is frequently designated the Great White Brotherhood, though its members do not reside together as a localized community. Each of them largely secludes himself from the mundane world. While they remain in constant communion with one another and with their head, their mastery over higher forces is so absolute that this communion is achieved without the necessity of physically convening. Often, they continue to dwell within their respective nations, their immense power remaining entirely unsuspected by those in their immediate vicinity. Any individual who so desires may attract their attention, though this can be accomplished solely by proving oneself worthy of their regard. No one need harbor the fear that his earnest efforts will go unobserved. Such an oversight is an impossibility. A person who dedicates himself to this noble service stands out from the remainder of humanity like a brilliant flame piercing the darkness of night. A select few of these remarkable adepts, laboring tirelessly for the betterment of the world, are willing to accept as apprentices those who have resolved to devote themselves unequivocally to the service of mankind. These specific adepts are recognized as masters. One such apprentice was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a formidable soul dispatched to bestow profound esoteric knowledge upon the world. Alongside Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, She established the Theosophical Society to disseminate the invaluable wisdom she had been tasked to share. Among those who encountered her during those formative days was Mr. Alfred Percy Sinnett, the editor of the Pioneer, and his keen intellect immediately grasped the magnitude and significance of the teachings she presented. Although Madame Blavatsky had previously authored Isis Unveiled, the work had garnered relatively modest attention. It was Mr. Sinnett who first rendered these teachings genuinely accessible to Western readers through his two foundational books, The Occult World and Esoteric Buddhism. It was through these very works that I initially became acquainted with their author, and subsequently with Madame Blavatsky herself. From both of them I derived a wealth of knowledge. When I inquired of Madame Blavatsky how one might learn even more, how one could achieve definitive progress along the path she had illuminated for us, she informed me of the possibility that other students might be accepted as apprentices by the great masters, just as she herself had been. She emphasized that the sole method of securing such acceptance was to prove oneself worthy through earnest and purely altruistic labor. She instructed me that to reach such an exalted goal, an individual must remain absolutely singular in his determination. No one attempting to serve both God and Mammon could ever hope to attain success. One of these masters himself had stated this precept. In order to succeed, a pupil must forsake his own world and enter into ours. This dictates that he must cease to be among the majority who strive for wealth and power, and instead join that minuscule minority who care nothing for such trivialities, living solely to devote themselves selflessly to the betterment of the world. She warned us unequivocally that the path was arduous to traverse. We were to expect misunderstanding and revilement from those still entrenched in the material world, and we had nothing to anticipate but the most grueling of labor. Furthermore, while the ultimate result was assured, no one could predict how long it might take to reach fruition. A number of us accepted these stringent conditions with joy, and we have never, for a single moment, regretted that decision. Following several years of dedicated work, I was granted the immense privilege of coming into direct contact with these great masters of the wisdom. From them, I learned many profound truths. Among them, the method by which I could personally and firsthand verify the majority of the teachings they had imparted. Thus, in this matter, I write exclusively of that which I know and have witnessed for myself. Certain aspects are mentioned within the teachings that require, for their verification, spiritual faculties far exceeding any I have cultivated thus far. Regarding these points, I can only state that they are entirely consistent with what I already know, and in numerous instances, they serve as necessary hypotheses to account for the phenomena I have observed. These concepts were conveyed to me, alongside the remainder of the theosophical system, upon the unquestionable authority of these mighty teachers. Since that time, I have learned to independently examine the vast majority of what I was taught, and I have found the information provided to me to be correct in every conceivable particular. Therefore, I am thoroughly justified in presuming that the remaining portion, which I cannot yet verify, will similarly prove to be accurate once I attain the requisite level of spiritual development. To secure the honor of being accepted as an apprentice to one of the masters of the wisdom remains the paramount objective set before every earnest theosophical student. Such an aspiration, however, demands resolute endeavor. Throughout history, there have consistently been individuals willing to exert the requisite effort, and, consequently, there have always been those who possessed this profound knowledge. This wisdom is of such a transcendent nature that, upon fully grasping it, an individual transcends mere humanity and passes beyond the limits of our ordinary comprehension. Nevertheless, there exist distinct stages in the acquisition of this knowledge, and we may glean much, should we so choose, from those who are themselves still in the process of learning. For all human beings occupy one or another of the various rungs upon the ladder of evolution. Primitive humanity stands at its very base, whereas we, as civilized beings, have already ascended a portion of the way. Yet, although we may look back and observe the evolutionary rungs beneath us that we have already surmounted, we may simultaneously gaze upward to behold numerous steps above us that we have not yet reached. Just as there are individuals currently situated on every rung below us, allowing us to witness the successive stages through which mankind has ascended, so too are there beings positioned on each of the rungs above us, enabling us, through their study, to perceive how humanity shall elevate itself in the future. It is precisely because we observe individuals upon every step of this ladder, which leads upward toward a glory for which we do not yet possess the words to articulate, that we remain assured that the ascent to such splendor is indeed possible for us. Those who stand far above us, so elevated that they appear unto us as gods in their marvelous knowledge and power, inform us that they, not long ago, stood precisely where we find ourselves today, and they clearly delineate the intervening steps, which we also must traverse if we are to become as they are. Chapter 3. The formation of a solar system, the inception of the universe, if indeed it ever possessed a beginning, lies entirely beyond the scope of our comprehension. At the most remote epoch of history accessible to our inquiry, the two great dualities of spirit and matter, of life and form, are already engaged in vigorous activity. We find that the conventional conception of matter necessitates revision, for that which is commonly designated as force and matter represents, in reality, merely two variations of spirit at differing stages of evolution, while the true matter or the fundamental basis of all things resides unperceived in the background. A French scientist has recently stated, "There is no matter, there are nothing but holes in the ether." This assertion similarly aligns with the celebrated theory posited by Professor Osborne Reynolds. Occult investigation demonstrates this to be the accurate perspective, and in that manner elucidates the meaning of Oriental sacred texts when they declare that matter is merely an illusion. The ultimate root matter as perceived from our current level of existence corresponds to what scientists designate as the ether of space. This primordial substance has been delineated in occult chemistry under the appellation of koilon. To every physical sense, the space occupied by it appears entirely void, yet in reality, this ether is profoundly denser than anything our minds can conceive. Its density is defined by Professor Reynolds as being 10,000 times greater than that of water, and its mean pressure as 750,000 tons per square inch. This substance remains perceptible exclusively to highly developed clairvoyant faculties. We must postulate an epoch, though we possess no direct empirical knowledge concerning this point, during which this substance saturated the entirety of space. We must further surmise that some exalted being, not merely the deity of a single solar system, but an entity almost infinitely superior to such a station, altered this state of quiescence by pouring forth his spirit or energetic force into a specific sector of this matter, a sector equivalent in magnitude to an entire universe. This effect of the introduction of this force mirrors the exhalation of a mighty breath. It has generated within this ether an incalculable multitude of minute spherical bubbles. The bubbles are spoken of in the secret doctrine as the holes which Fohat digs in space, and these bubbles constitute the ultimate atoms of which our so-called matter is composed. They are not the conventional atoms of the chemist, nor are they even the ultimate atoms of the physical realm. They occupy a substantially higher level of existence, and those entities typically designated as atoms are, in fact, composed of vast aggregations of these foundational bubbles, as shall be elucidated subsequently. When the solar deity commences the creation of his system, he finds readily available to his hand this primordial material, an infinite mass of minuscule bubbles that can be constructed into the myriad forms of matter as we recognize it. He initiates the process by defining the boundaries of his field of activity, a vast sphere whose circumference significantly exceeds the orbit of the outermost of his future planets. Within the limits of that sphere, he establishes a form of gigantic vortex, a motion that sweeps all the dispersed bubbles together into an immense central mass, thereby providing the material for the incipient nebula. Into this colossal revolving sphere, he projects successive impulses of force, gathering the bubbles into increasingly complex aggregations, and producing in this manner 7 gigantic interpenetrating worlds of matter of different degrees of density, all remaining concentric and all occupying the selfsame space. Acting through his third aspect, he discharges the first of these developmental impulses into this stupendous sphere. It establishes a vast multitude of diminutive vortices throughout the entire sphere, each of which draws 49 bubbles into itself, and organizes them into a specific geometric configuration. These resulting miniature configurations of bubbles constitute the atoms of the second of the interpenetrating worlds. The entirety of the bubbles is not utilized in this process, a sufficient quantity being retained in a dissociated state to serve as the foundational atoms for the first and highest of these worlds. In due course arrives the second impulse, which seizes upon nearly all of these 49 bubble atoms, leaving solely enough to supply the atoms for the second world, draws them back into itself and then, projecting them outward once more, establishes among them new vortices, each of which contains within itself 2,401 bubbles, 49 superscript 2. These subsequently form the atoms of the third world. After a further interval, a third impulse arrives, which similarly appropriates almost all of these 2,401 bubble atoms, retracts them into their original unmanifested form, and again projects them outward once more as the atoms of the fourth world, each atom this time comprising 49 superscript 3 bubbles. This cyclic process is reiterated until the sixth of these successive impulses has forged the atom of the seventh or lowest world, that ultimate atom containing 49 of the primordial bubbles. This atom of the seventh world constitutes the fundamental atom of the physical realm, not any of the elemental atoms referenced by modern chemists, but rather that ultimate particle from which all of their chemical atoms are constructed. At this stage, we have reached a state of affairs wherein the vast whirling sphere contains within itself 7 distinct classifications of matter, all entirely uniform in essence, since all are constructed from the identical type of primordial bubbles, but differing profoundly in their respective degrees of density. All of these material types are freely intermingled, such that specimens of each variety could be discovered within any small, randomly selected portion of the sphere, with, however, a general overarching tendency for the heavier atoms to gravitate increasingly toward the center. The seventh impulse emanated from the third aspect of the deity does not, as occurred previously, retract the recently formed physical atoms back into the original dissociated bubbles, but rather draws them together into specific aggregations, thereby generating a variety of what may be termed proto-elements, and these, in turn, are coalesced into the diverse forms recognized by modern science as chemical elements. The synthesis of these extends over a prolonged span of ages, and they are generated in a precise, definitive sequence through the interaction of several distinct forces, as is accurately delineated in Sir William Crookes's paper, The Genesis of the Elements. Indeed, the process of their creation remains incomplete even at present, uranium being the latest and heaviest element known to us thus far, but others still more complex may perhaps be produced in the future. As successive ages rolled onward, the condensation steadily increased, and presently the stage of a vast glowing nebula was achieved. As it cooled, maintaining its rapid rotation, it flattened into an immense disk and progressively fragmented into rings encircling a central body, an arrangement bearing a distinct resemblance to the current configuration of Saturn, albeit on a vastly grander scale. As the epoch approached when planets would be requisite for the purposes of evolution, the deity established, within the thickness of each ring, a subsidiary vortex into which a substantial portion of the ring's matter was gradually amassed. The collisions among these coalescing fragments precipitated a resurgence of heat, rendering the resultant planet a mass of incandescent gas for an extended duration. Incrementally, it cooled once again, ultimately becoming suitable to serve as the theater for life such as ours. In this manner were all the planets formed. Almost all the matter comprising those interpenetrating worlds was, by this juncture, concentrated within the newly constituted planets. Each of these celestial bodies was, and remains, composed of all these diverse gradations of matter. The earth upon which we presently reside is not merely a colossal sphere of physical matter, constructed from the atoms of that lowest realm. Rather, it possesses an abundant supplementary supply of matter pertaining to the sixth, fifth, fourth, and other worlds. It is a recognized principle among all students of science that particles of matter never genuinely make physical contact, even within the most obdurate of substances. The interstices separating them are invariably far greater in proportion to their own dimensions, indeed enormously greater. Consequently, there exists ample accommodation for all the other varieties of atoms from those distinct worlds, allowing them not only to reside within the interstices of the denser matter but also to circulate quite freely among and around them. Therefore, this globe upon which we dwell is not a singular world, but rather 7 interpenetrating worlds occupying the selfsame space, with the exception that the finer classifications of matter extend further from the center than does the denser material. We have assigned designations to these intermingling spheres for the sake of convenience in discourse. No name is requisite for the first, as humanity is not yet in direct communion with it. However, when its mention is necessary, it may be termed the divine world. The second is delineated as the monadic, for within it exist those sparks of the divine life which we term the human monads. Yet, neither of these realms can be accessed by the most exalted clairvoyant investigations presently available to us. The third sphere, the atoms of which contain 2,401 bubbles, is designated the spiritual world, as it is the domain where the highest spirit in man, as currently constituted, functions. The fourth is the intuitional world, previously designated in theosophical literature as the Buddhic plane. This is because from it emanate the highest intuitions. The fifth is the mental world, for from its substance the mind of man is constructed. The sixth is termed the emotional or astral world, as human emotions provoke undulations within its matter. The appellation astral was bestowed upon it by medieval alchemists, owing to the fact that its matter appears starry or luminous when compared to that of the denser realm. The seventh world, comprised of the type of matter we observe all around us, is identified as the physical. The substance from which all these interpenetrating worlds are constructed is fundamentally the same matter, albeit uniquely arranged and exhibiting varying degrees of density. Consequently, The rates at which these varied types of matter normally vibrate also differ. They may be conceptualized as a vast gamut of undulations, comprising numerous octaves. Physical matter utilizes a specific number of the lowest among these octaves. Astral matter occupies another cluster of octaves immediately above that. Mental matter employs a still higher grouping, and so forth. Not only does each of these worlds possess its exclusive type of matter, but it also features its own distinct aggregations of that matter, its own unique substances. Within each world, we categorize these substances into 7 classes, determined by the vibratory rate of their molecules. Typically, though not invariably, a slower oscillation corresponds to a larger molecule, that is to say, synthesized through a specific arrangement of the smaller molecules belonging to the subsequent higher subdivision. The application of heat augments the dimensions of the molecules while simultaneously quickening and amplifying their undulation. Thus, they encompass a wider expanse, causing the object as a whole to expand. This progression continues until a critical threshold is attained, wherein the molecular aggregation disintegrates, and the substance transitions from its current condition to the one immediately above it. Pertaining to the matter of the physical world, the 7 subdivisions are represented by 7 degrees of material density, to which, ascending from the lowest, we assign the designations solid, liquid, gaseous, etheric, superetheric, subatomic, and atomic. The atomic subdivision is that in which all forms are constructed through the compression of physical atoms into specific configurations, devoid of any preliminary aggregation of these atoms into blocks or molecules. Representing the ultimate physical atom, for illustrative purposes, as a brick, any form within the atomic subdivision would be created by amassing a selection of these bricks and structuring them into a determined shape. To generate matter for the subsequent lower subdivision, a specific quantity of these bricks or atoms would first be assembled and cemented into diminutive blocks, comprising, for instance, 5, 6, or 7 bricks each, and these resultant blocks would thereafter serve as foundational building stones. For the next ensuing subdivision, several blocks from the second tier, cemented together in particular forms, would constitute the new building stones, a process repeating until the lowest subdivision is reached. To transition any substance from a solid to a liquid condition, which is to say, to melt it, is to accelerate the vibration of its compound molecules until they are ultimately shaken apart into the simpler constituent molecules from which they were constructed. This procedure can, in all instances, be reiterated perpetually until ultimately any and every physical substance is reduced to the fundamental ultimate atoms of the physical world. Each of these spheres possesses its own inhabitants, whose sensory faculties are typically capable of responding solely to the undulations of their native world. A human being residing, as we all do, in the physical world perceives sights, sounds, and tactile sensations through vibrations linked to the surrounding physical matter. He is simultaneously encompassed by the astral, mental, and other realms that interpenetrate his own denser world. Nevertheless, he remains ordinarily unconscious of them, for his senses cannot respond to the oscillations of their matter. This is comparable to how our physical eyes are unable to perceive the vibrations of ultraviolet light, despite scientific experiments demonstrating their existence, whereas other consciousnesses, possessing differently formed organs, are capable of perceiving them. An entity dwelling within the astral world might occupy the exact same spatial coordinates as a being residing in the physical world, yet each would remain completely oblivious to the other, nor would either impede the other's unhindered movement in any manner. The same principle holds true for all other worlds. At this very moment, we are surrounded by these realms of finer matter, existing as closely to us as the world we visibly perceive. Their denizens pass through and around us, yet we are entirely incognizant of their presence. Given that our evolution is presently centered upon this globe we designate the Earth, it is solely in connection with it that we shall discuss these higher worlds. Therefore, in the future, when I employ the term astral world, I shall refer strictly to the astral component of our own globe, rather than to the astral portion of the entire solar system, as has been the case heretofore. This astral component of our own world is similarly a globe, albeit one composed of astral matter. It occupies the selfsame position as the globe we perceive. However, its matter, being exceedingly lighter, extends outward into space on all sides of us much further than does the terrestrial atmosphere, indeed vastly further. It stretches to a radius marginally less than the mean distance of the Moon. Consequently, although the two physical globes, the Earth and the Moon, are situated nearly 240,000 miles apart, the astral globes of these two celestial bodies make contact when the Moon is in perigee, though not when she is in apogee. I shall apply the designation mental world to the even more expansive globe of mental matter within which our physical Earth resides. Ascending to yet higher globes, we encounter spheres of sufficient magnitude to intersect with the corresponding spheres of other planets within the system, although their substance permeates our immediate surroundings upon the surface of the solid Earth just as thoroughly as that of the lower spheres. All these spheres of subtler matter constitute an integral part of us, simultaneously revolving around the Sun alongside their visible counterpart. The student would be well advised to accustom himself to conceiving of our Earth as this entire aggregation of interpenetrating worlds, rather than merely the comparatively diminutive physical sphere at its core. Chapter 4. The Evolution of Life. All the vital impulses previously delineated as constructing the interpenetrating worlds emanate from the third aspect of the deity. Consequently, within the Christian paradigm, that aspect is designated as the giver of life, the spirit who brooded over the face of the waters of space. In theosophical literature, these impulses are generally regarded collectively and termed the first outpouring. Once the worlds had been prepared to this degree, and the majority of the chemical elements were already in existence, the second outpouring of life transpired, originating from the second aspect of the deity. This infusion brought with it the capacity for combination. Across all worlds, it encountered pre-existing constituents that may be conceived of as elements corresponding to their respective realms. It proceeded to amalgamate these elements into organisms, which it subsequently ensouled, thereby constructing the 7 kingdoms of nature. Theosophy recognizes 7 kingdoms, as it regards humanity as distinct from the animal kingdom, and it accounts for several evolutionary stages imperceptible to the physical eye, assigning to them the medieval appellation of elemental kingdoms. The divine life pours itself into matter from above, and its entire trajectory may be conceptualized in 2 distinct phases: the progressive assumption of increasingly dense matter, followed by the gradual discarding of those vehicles once they have been assumed. The earliest level upon which its vehicles may be scientifically observed is the mental plane, the 5th when counting from the most subtle to the most dense, and the first upon which distinct globes exist. For the purposes of practical study, it proves convenient to bifurcate this mental world into 2 divisions, which we designate as the higher and the lower, contingent upon the relative density of their matter. The higher division comprises the 3 subtler subdivisions of mental matter, whereas the lower encompasses the remaining 4. As the outpouring reaches the higher mental world, it draws together the ethereal elements present, synthesizes them into what correspond to substances at that level, and from these substances constructs the forms it subsequently inhabits. We term this the first elemental kingdom. Following an extended epoch of evolution through various forms at that level, the wave of life, which presses steadily downwards throughout this process, learns to identify itself. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.